This is our final Ignite for the night, I believe.
Oh, man.
Sound like you mean it, come on.
Mark.
But we've got Mark!
Yay!
Sorry, no porn in mind. Anyway, I gotta talk fast. Man architecture. Albuquerque doubled in size, almost quadrupled between 1940 and 1960, so a lot of housing and other buildings were built then. It was all about space flight and hope for the future, atomic energy, and a lot of things. Anyway, Dookie architecture, named after a coffee shop in Los Angeles, built in 1949. As you can see, lots of wild colors, wild shapes, arrows. We'll come back to arrows again. International style is part of what's all grouped under what's called mid-century architecture. That's the Sims building downtown. They actually incorporated part of the old commercial club, which became the Chamber of Commerce, that brick wall there. And there's a house kind of in that rectilinear style. Horizontal and vertical slabs. In the 1950s, cars drew fins, so did buildings. By the way, every picture in here is a building in Albuquerque, taken within the last 2 years. So these buildings are actually out there. All different kinds of buildings, all these happen to be commercial. One of the whole points of my talk is so you can notice these buildings and recognize them when you see them out there. Very common facing to have flagstone, fieldstone. That building there is the Arts Lab. It used to be a car dealer. You can tell by the 1950s Oldsmobile Futuramic logo. Tile is very common in New Mexico, so it's hard to recognize that it's a very typical 1950s style thing, but here's just some places that have some real nice tile from the 50s around town. Colors. Doesn't show up here particularly well, but you have a lot of turquoise, a lot of pink, a lot of pastels. Very typical of the time. You can see the Lucky Boy typography. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I can talk lots of times. Anyway, typography, there we are. During that time, you got a lot of mixed fonts, script and more rectilinear Roman mixed together. Had to include Helvetica down there in the lower right from the College Park School up on Morris, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But anyway, mixed typography. Bow ties and rhomboids. I'd forgotten my fourth grade geometry. That should have said bow ties and trapezoids. Anyway, you see them all over. That's the College Park School down there. Even the chimneys are hourglass shaped, which I thought was really cool. And that was the solar building down there to the lower right. Even the building itself was trapezoid shaped. Any sign that's hung kind of like a flag on a flagpole, very typical. There are dozens and dozens of these all over town that have been repurposed, but that's how you can tell a kind of 1950s sign is it's kind of asymmetrical. Giants lived among us back then. Giant muffler men, or whatever they do, and they had giant pipe wrenches and paint cans and arrows and giant lettering on their TV stations. Those are all over town as well. Interesting. I didn't know what that was really called, if there are any architects in the audience. This should have said large glass areas. The upper right picture is from the motel at the Winrock Mall. I bet a lot of you didn't know there's a motel. There's a motel there. It's kind of all beat up. But anyway, lots of glass, very typical of 50s and 60s architecture. Arcs and parabolas. We have a great, almost original McDonald's on North 4th Street with an arc in that soaring roof, indicating kind of flight. And you can see the arcs in the buildings and on the American Furniture Building there. Flying roofs. You can see they have this kind of upward space flight aspect to them. This is a bank on Wyoming, the upper right. You can kind of see the wings, and St. Timothy's Church down there, you can definitely see the wings. Very typical design elements for the time. Lots of those around town. And folded roofs, folded like accordions in some cases. Here we have a middle school, a dry cleaner, a Denny's, and an office building. There are 2 or 3 office buildings behind the Hastings at San Pedro and Lomas that look like that, straight out of the 1964-65 World's Fair. Butterfly roofs, which are just single V's. That's the Pica House on the UNM campus up there to the right. That's an office building with some nice flagstone on a mountain there on the lower right. And there are a lot of residentials as well. Not much space age stuff in town. I did find stuff, and that's the upper right there is not from the day the earth stood still. That's actually the lighting at the Winrock Mall. Really amazing, it's still there, 1950s, 60s lighting. Shallow V roofs. I ended up with lots of slides about roofs, don't know why. But this very shallow V is very typical of that architecture. And Silva Lane's up there on Eubank, wherever it is, has a lot of interesting 1950s, 60s stuff about it. I picked these buildings from around town that feature a lot of these things: the flagstones, the V roofs, the turquoise, the tile, the trapezoids, and you can find some buildings that incorporate many, many different 1950s elements. Anyway, this has absolutely nothing to do with what I do on an everyday basis. My wife and I run a digital marketing and advertising agency here in town. So, anyway.